Following the discussion from last week about journaling, I want you to listen to a letter that Lynanne sent me, particularly because she doesn't just tell me a challenge outright. She starts talking about the challenge she's having, and as she keeps writing, she keeps going deeper as to what the real issue is and the underlying issue and what's underneath that and underneath that. So just following on from last week, listen to this in terms of both journaling and in terms of the issue she's talking about. She says, I have many challenges I could address, most centred around the fact that I often don't want to spend the time or money to make a muslin. My real struggle with my sewing, however, is guilt. Guilt that I have a fabric stash, pattern stash and loads of ideas, but I don't act on them and keep buying more fabric, more patterns, dreaming up more ideas. I'm the breadwinner of my family, and that in itself is stressful. I feel guilt for wanting to spend the time sewing instead of being with my family. My husband and my son have their own hobbies and interests, but I feel guilty indulging my own interests because they're space and time intensive. I feel guilty that I would benefit from the time I spent. Hence I make Halloween outfits for my son, historic garb as gifts for my husband, but I skimp on me or do late night 11th hour sewing marathons that end up with less than spectacular results. As long as I've been sewing, I should be capable of some pretty polished work, but I don't allow myself the time or permission to sew just for me. Overcoming guilt is a huge challenge, and it affects everything from what I choose to sew, when, and what materials I use. And she ends, well, it felt kind of good to admit that. Well, that's a great example of journaling for a start, even though it was a letter to me. Lynanne talks about feeling guilty, first of all, that she has this fabric stash and all the patterns and everything, and she keeps buying more instead of using what she's got, but then goes beneath that guilt about sewing when she could or feels she should be spending time with her family. Now, she says she's the breadwinner of a family, so I do understand that guilt, because if you're the breadwinner, then Lynanne is probably the one going out to work, and her husband is probably doing most of the childcare, which means that the husband spends more time with the son, and she probably feels like she's always playing catch up in terms of how much time she spends with them, because they spend so much time together. So I do understand the issue. It's a deep sort of frustration with having to go out and work when you could be with your family. But I have some ideas on the subject of the sewing. When you come home from work at night, what do you do with your phone? Your phone has to be plugged in order to recharge. Even your phone needs to recharge, and so do you. And sewing is not an indulgent activity that takes away. It's an activity that recharges you and gives you more of the joy and the creativity you need to help your mental health be at its best. It's clear from her letter that family is the most important thing for Lynanne, which is wonderful. But how is she going to be the happiest and healthiest for them other than by taking a bit of time for herself sometimes? There's a spiritual teacher called Iyanla Van Zandt, and she said, "My cup runneth over. What runneth over is for you, but what's in the cup is for me." You need to be using your energy to look after yourself as well as your family. One really interesting phrase I picked out from this letter was that Lynanne feels guilty indulging her own interests because they are space and time intensive. And I think that speaks to a bigger issue about not only the space and time to sew, taking up space, having the courage to take up space in the world. And that can be space physically, that when you're cutting out fabric, it can be time, when it takes time to sew this thing and finish it. When you have a project that you're going to take time over, and it seems like it's going to take forever, and it seems like the fabric fills up the entire floor when you're cutting it out, it feels like you're taking up all the space, and it feels like you're being selfish. We've got to have some sense of being allowed to take up space in the world. And the concept of having the courage to take up space in the world is kind of a high level concept, but to bring it down to a practical level, if you are juggling your sewing with a family, I think that you can introduce a regular time, perhaps, at which this is mummy's sewing time. This is my time. The kid might go to soccer practice. You know, the partner might go out with their mates. But your sewing time at 8 o'clock on a Thursday night is your sewing time. So you can set that as a time when you take time for yourself. Make an agreement that this is the time that you take for yourself, and that can be a beginning place where you can make roads into this idea that you're allowed to have a little bit of space for yourself. Finally, if you feel the urge to create something, that is not about you. Something is trying to come out through you. Something is trying to be expressed through you. You are just the channel for that to happen. Something magical needs to take place. When you create something, when you're creating something out of nothing, that's a magical act. You're just the channel or the conduit or the medium through which that creativity is happening. And to block that flow of creativity is to feel stuck and to feel like something is wrong, because that energy needs to flow through you and you need to open the door and let it come through in order to feel fulfilled. There is a reason that you've been given those ideas, and there's been a reason that you've been given all that inspiration. Your job is to get out of its way and let it come through you. Regardless of what your little monkey mind says, your job is to get out of the way and let that creativity come through you. So I hope that gives you a different perspective. So get out of your own way and do something creative this week.